Hey, chatters. So we've been along our coding journey for just a little while now, really focused on the basics. So what we're going to do together today is talk a little bit more about where we've been and then where we're going before we get into the next phase. This is like our checkpoint. So if you haven't done the stuff before or you don't have the skills that I'm going to be talking about in this video, maybe go back and do it so that you're ready for the next phase. So let's start off with where we've been. We've focused on four different areas in the last, I don't know, seven ish videos. The first is really getting comfortable with GitHub. GitHub's really important. It's like the Google Docs of code. It's where it makes it easier to version things, upload things, share things, and open source your code if you want to get some help or some comments. Next up, we got navigating VS Code. VS Code is what you actually use to code things up and run them, at least in the back end of things. So it's really important that you're comfortable with navigating this, uploading files, and using GitHub to clone repositories, since that's where you'll actually be running the code for the most part. The next thing we did was code with large language models. At least at the point of filming this, Claude Sonnet 3.5 is the best model for coding. And in particular, they had recently added this projects functionality where we'll allow you to upload documents, create a system prompt, and generally interact with more of a knowledge base. So you can upload your code or documentation or whatever, and then not have to worry about putting that in every single time. So highly recommend Claude projects for coding things up. And we used Echoed, my coding assistant, to make a few things like Babel Scribe, which allows you to upload some sort of audio file with someone talking, sends it off to the Whisper API through OpenAI to transcribe it, and then allows you to apply a prompt to that. The last thing we focused on was making your code modular. This is super important. You want to have some sort of main function that orchestrates everything and then chunk everything out into ontological or categorical functionality so that it's easy for you to swap things out, change things without breaking the whole or searching through. And most importantly, if you're like me coding with these large language models, they can only output so much at any given time, which means only so much code that it can give you. So the more you break it up and compartmentalize it, the easier it'll also be to use the large language model to generate. Again, that is where we were. Now let's talk about where we're going. If you have not done the where we were, I highly recommend you go back and get practice with that because you're really going to need it for this next phase that we're moving into. So, the next step on our journey is going to be taking all of your data and getting it into one format in one place. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I proselytize and push Obsidian. I love Obsidian for many reasons, but in this context, I really want to focus on Markdown. Markdown is the common file type, no matter what. If Word were to go away today, things would still be able to open Markdown. And so the idea here is we want to take all of the text that you have that is in all these various places, get them all into Markdown, and get them all into an Obsidian vault. You can put it other places, but we're going to be interacting with Obsidian, so I highly recommend we do it this way. After we're done converting everything into Markdown and getting into an Obsidian vault, we're going to talk a little bit about JSON. JSON, I'm not going to get into it right now, but it's very important in terms of how we're interacting with data encoding, but also in what we do with large language models. JSON is the primary thing we use when using function and tool calls. When we're done gallivanting around JSON, we're going to move into Obsistent tools. If you haven't heard about Obsistence yet, it's a creation of Synaptic Labs, primarily James over here, and it's more or less ChatGPT in your vault. I'll leave the link to get to the repo below. But the idea here is we actually, since we're getting everything into Obsidian, we want to work directly within Obsidian too. And how we do that is we create these tools that allow us to do all kinds of ridiculous things. One such tool is SynthGen. And the idea behind SynthGen is you're going to be able to give it the names of folders or whatever in your Obsidian vault, and it's going to run through and create synthetic conversations based on each of your notes through the APIs. Once we're done with that, we will have everything that we need in terms of the data to actually start fine tuning our models. That's going to be fun. But until then, we got to get through all this stuff, generate our data, and we're going to do it together. That's going to be fun. But until then, we got to get through all this stuff, generate our data, and we're going to do it together. Thanks, chatters, and I'm excited for this series.